welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. This is our year-end review episode, which is quite a bit different from our normal episodes. We're going to be talking about the games we played throughout the year and events within the community. This is going to be with myself, Lowell Francis, my co-host, Sherry Stewart.
Oh, hi.
This is one of those episodes that were a little more freeform, so you can hear that going on behind the background.
I'm still going through my lists here. So many games.
And with us is Rich Rogers.
Hey guys, so excited to be on with you guys again so soon.
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk with each of the three of us about our picks for the game of the year, a little bit about the year and why we chose those games. But in between our segments, you're going to hear comments and choices from members of the Gauntlet community who have selected their picks. And I'm looking at the list, and it's a really interesting array of games. In past years, we've had some heavy overlap, but this year it's wonderfully diverse, the sheer number of games that we have here.
It's the golden age of RPGs.
It is a golden age. It's great. It's been an amazing year for the development of games. So we're going to start us out with a little taste of some of our community members, and then we're going to come back to us.
Hey, this is Rich again. I am very excited to have on a couple who I've had the joy of gaming with over the past year. We have Leah and Alexi Sargent. Alexi runs Cloven Pine Games, and Leah is lead playtester and occasional developer for some of the games you can check out on itch.io. How are you doing, Alexi?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Rich.
And how are you doing, Leah?
Very well.
All right. I brought both of you on specifically to talk about your game of the year for 2019. Who would like to go first?
I'd be happy to go first. So an honorable mention to a favorite session from 2019, which I'm going to give to playing Fall of Magic basically all day on Memorial Day when I got to game in person with Jim Crocker, wonderful Gauntlet stalwart, who came over to my house with his excellent scroll edition of Fall of Magic. And he and another gaming friend of mine played Fall of Magic for the whole day, traversing the whole map, going underground, and spinning out a sort of bittersweet Miyazaki-esque end of Magic fantasy.
That sounds amazing. I have only played on a Roll20 frame, or actually it was somebody taking a Google drawing and mocking up their own before the Roll20 frame came out. So I have seen it at Origins. What a beautiful map. That sounds super duper fun. All right. Well, Alexi, what is your game system or your favorite game of the year?
I have to give Game of the Year to Masks by Magpie Games, which I know is I'm sure it's a popular choice this year, last year, years before. It's a amazing system for playing stories of teenage superheroes, learning about their powers, and figuring out their place in the world. And I'd say this year in particular, I got to experience how versatile Masks is, because I was looking through. I've played in 8 or 9 different one-shots or series of Masks, including wrapping up running a year-long campaign of it. But between those one-shots and series, I've played Masks as a game set back in the Golden Age with World War II era young superheroes. I've played Masks where there was a time loop and the teenage characters were stuck in a time loop until they could figure out how to break out of it. And I played Masks with a Freaky Friday setup where partway through the series, our characters swapped bodies and swapped playbooks. And even with all these crazy twists introduced, the game is really strong, tells emotional stories, takes an approach to superpowers that is quick and easy to pick up. And so I want to recommend Masks as my Game of the Year 2019.
Holy moly, those setups and frames are awesome, man. You've been very lucky with Masks craziness this year. What a great game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, props to Leah, because she ran the Time Loop and Freaky Friday Masks series.
And I'll be honest, the Freaky Friday thing was my idea, but I only ran the time loop because Magpie assigned me for Gen Con run Masks in a time loop and gave zero guidance on what that would entail. And I'm like, all right, here we go. Buckle up.
That sounds awesome. All right. Well, Leah, what about you? What's your game of the year?
So I'm also going to give an honorable mention to we both plan to go to Breakout Con in Canada this year. And when all the flights out of Newark were grounded, one of us, and it was not me, decided to get on a 12-hour bus to Canada overnight.
Wow.
And I did not do that, so I did not go to Breakout Con. But an honorable mention to the folks who came over to my house for Locked In Con to play Autumn Triduum, Alexi's game of nuns fighting evil, 2 of whom had never played an RPG before, and it just came over to kind of make it up to me that I wasn't in Canada, which was great.
What good friends. That's awesome.
But my game of the year is a Cloven Pine game. It's the Great Soul Train Robbery, where a crew of desperados decides to rob the train to hell. It's the first game I've run on the Gauntlet. I ran it for Gauntlet Con this year.
Oh, nice.
And I like it as a player, but I love it as a GM because, once you're on the train to hell, you can be really inventive, including with like kind of dreamlike logic for what's on this train. And Alexi's written some nice tables of, a dining car, a fuel car where it might be something like Stony Hearts or Nightmares. And what I love is that it kind of gives me the chance to pose to the players the environment as antagonist rather than, all right, well, you've got to fight, these furies, or you've got to fight the devil. That you have to do in the last car, right? But making the whole world the antagonist and seeing how they respond to it.
Wow, that sounds so cool. Great Soul Train Robbery and Masks are the Sergeant's votes for Games of the Year. All right. Well, thank you both so much for giving me a few minutes so we could feature you here on Game of the Year episode of Gauntlet.
Great to be here, Rich.
Always fun playing.
Hello, my name is Alan, and I am both a player and a GM on the Gauntlet. And when asked to recommend a game of the year, I think it depends which criteria I'm using. So if I was using perhaps game that in the last year has given me most fun, I think it was probably playing Masks in Leandro Pondoc's multiple series of sessions of Masks. It just caught the idea of teen superheroes growing up in difficulties and becoming proper heroes just perfectly. So that's one candidate. If I was thinking of something that I found personally rewarding, it would be, I have to say, my own PBTA game, Jotunweird. But as that's not available to the public, that doesn't seem, as well as being slightly arrogant to select the game that you've put together yourself, I'm not putting that on the list. So I'm going for the game that has inspired my creative juices most, and that would be Cthulhu Dark. For such a simple set of rules, you can play anything with those rules, I think, that involves tension. And so, I've hacked it to play Alien. I've hacked it to play World War II espionage in settings like Achtung Cthulhu. And I'm thinking now about Cold War espionage. I think it's a really neat system that doesn't get in the way of play, and as I say, I have found remarkably flexible in ways it can be used. So that's my game of the year. It is Cthulhu Dark.
G'day, this is Blake Ryan from Australia. Yeah, there's been a lot of good games this year. I ran a series of Monster of the Week set in the Dresdenverse, two lots of 3. They all worked really well, and I'm so glad, they're on YouTube so I can watch them again later on down the track. And one of them, Alun, was playing a divine, like a security agent, told by Odin to keep an eye on the Flake, and the Flake was played by Kevin. And, being a Flake, he's paranoid about everything, but Alun's character gave him a bug that is a tracking device to say, this is an example of what you need to look out for in case the bad guys are bugging your apartment or whatever. So Kevin's Flake kept it in the front of his journal, saying, watch out for this. But it was a live, active bug. That's how Alun's character was keeping an eye on him. And it's just lots of little quirky things like that, how the characters interacted that made it great. Later on, Alun's character was having a duel with the big bad, and, solo one-on-one having the big biffo. And Ludo and Erez characters weren't helping that at all. They were breaking into the bad guy's car, and it was just great how everyone had a solid idea of what their characters, who they were and where they were going with them. And it just gelled really well. All right, that's it for me. Keep gaming, everyone.
Hi, this is Chris with The Gauntlet, and I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite games from this year. I got to play a lot of really good games, and I got to play a lot of really fun new games, but my favorite so far this year, I have to say, is Hit the Streets, Defend the Block by Rich Rogers. It was still on a Kickstarter earlier this year, and it is a supers game, which all of those are near and dear to my heart, but it, in particular, has a focus that I think brings it up to one of my favorite games because it really gets you to think about the scale of the superheroes that you're operating with, and it brings things down to the level of a neighborhood. It makes you, in the process of creating your characters, in the process of creating the place where they live, in the places where they are, it makes you think about the kind of neighborhood they're in, why they think it's a neighborhood worth defending, worth fighting for, worth getting out and trying to help. And it makes you think about who these characters are, who would want to do that. There's lots of different supers games out there that deal with all sorts of power levels, and some of them that, Justice League style games or Avengers or things like that. But Hit the Streets is at the level of, say, your maybe The Outsiders, or Marvel's Netflix shows based around the Defenders. It's a story that focuses on heroes trying to just defend the place where they live and to make that place better. This game makes you, as a part of that process, build your neighborhood. It makes you put that neighborhood together. Think of places that are in that neighborhood. Think of people that define the neighborhood. Think of your favorite restaurant, the place where you work, the place where other people have to work because they're in that neighborhood, the places that are the favorites of all the neighborhood but everybody knows are on the way out, the places that are coming up and coming that are maybe forcing out some of the old standbys in the neighborhood. Who are the people in the neighborhood that everybody likes? Who are the people that everybody hates? And who are these heroes that are going to try to build this neighborhood back up to where they want it to be? Or maybe to build it into a better neighborhood than it ever was to start with. The system it uses is based on the One Percenters game, and it's a very straightforward version of that system. It has a dice mechanic that's easy to get around. It involves a focus on defining what you want to do and how you want to do it, and building your role, building your dice pool from there. And it has a very fun system of people assisting and helping out, and it kind of has a way of sharing the risk out between all the people that help. And if people help, they can also suffer some of the consequences if things don't go well. And so it gives you that sort of double-edged sword, because everybody wants to help, but not everybody wants to take that risk all the time. And that kind of cooperative mechanic, I think, really makes the characters, and by extension their players, think about what they're doing and how they want to go about helping, and when it's a good idea to try and help, because you've only got limited resources. Everybody can't help all the time. People burn out. Superheroes burn out. The game has a mechanic that deals with that. And all of those things together, the neighborhood construction, the focus on these heroes that aren't going to be stopping giant alien invasions or fighting mythical monsters or battling the latest, greatest world-dominating supervillain. This is a bunch of people that are working hard to make their neighborhood better. And they're on a scale that's meant to be able to do that. And this game allows you to kind of, bring your focus in tight to these heroes, to who they are, and to putting them together. And it also, as a part of that, has a lot of team mechanics that I think build on a lot of ideas that I think people have seen in other games that are powered by the apocalypse, comfort and support style moves. But in this game, they're set around like building these little teamwork, these little team vignettes. Like people are talking, people are going out and doing things that help them to recharge, that help them to get themselves back on track to doing the things that need to be done. All of those things together, I think make Hit the Streets, Defend the Block my favorite new game that I've gotten to play this year. It brought out a bunch of great ideas from me. I've seen it bring out a bunch of great ideas from other people. And I've seen some really great neighborhoods get built in this system. And while they don't always turn out the way maybe we always want them to in the end, because not every story gets to have a happy ending, I think it builds to what we all really want, which is to build up really good stories about heroes who maybe aren't the most powerful heroes out there, but who are trying to do the best they can for the neighborhood and the communities that they care about. And I think that's a really, really great focus for a superhero game, and there's not a whole lot of superhero games that are really pushing that narrative and pushing that style of play and that kind of focus. And for those reasons, I think that's my favorite game of the year.
Hi, my name's David, and I've been playing Games with the Gauntlet since August of last year now. So I've played some great games during that time. And the game I'm going to talk about today, the one I've chosen as my game of the year, is Bite Marks by Becky Anderson of Black Armada Games. So Bite Marks is a PBTA game of Werewolf Pack dynamics. It's, I believe it's available now for public release after having a successful Kickstarter earlier this year. So, as I say, it's a game of Werewolf Pack dynamics. So in it's a sort of urban fantasy style game where you will play members of a werewolf pack. And one of the things you do is come together to build that pack and build the customs and traditions as part of character creation, as well as building the personal relationships between all of those characters. So the idea with this is to create situations where you're forced to work against your own interests and leave things messy and feral, which is very cool. The playbooks are evocative, all representing different roles that you might take on within the pack. One of the things I really like about them is this system of heartbeats, which are little personality traits and role-playing cues you can pick up on. Every time you hit one of those in a scene, it earns you experience. So that's a nice way of kind of giving that thematic feel of the playbooks in a mechanized way. Another thing I really like with those is the way that there is an alpha playbook for being in charge of the pack, but it is possible for one of the moves lets you challenge the current alpha, and if you win that challenge, you can actually take that playbook off of them. You now become the new alpha, and the previous alpha has to pick a new playbook, and I think that's a really neat thing to see. The moves are quite dynamic, quite quick and simple to introduce into play, which is always nice to keep things moving in a game. My favourite move is Spill, which is a move that lets you, whenever you reveal a secret or are emotionally intimate with another member of the pack, it grants you sort of a currency and lets you do some stuff called pack pool. But the thing I really like about this is it rewards you for being both confrontational and emotionally vulnerable with other members of the pack, which helps keep the story moving and has always worked to great effect when I've seen it. And this pack pool that I mentioned, it lets you can spend it in sort of more action oriented scenes. If you spend a certain number of it, it can let you take kind of decisive actions that like to take on entire groups of people, and it can kind of really help simplify down big action scenes so that they play out nice and smooth while still keeping some really interesting narrative beats to them, which is great. And so I think, as I said, I really enjoyed the game when I've run it, and I would recommend you go out and take a look. Thanks very much.
Welcome back. We are going to start with the person who has crushed me under their boot in terms of number of games played and run and so on. He will talk about exactly how he has destroyed me this year. Rich, talk to us about your year in review and talk to us about your game of the year.
Okay. So I began the year 2019 a little tired from having achieved the Ladder of Insanity in 2018. Ladder of Insanity is 10 rungs, and the way you hit the 10th rung is for every rung, the number of the rung is the number of plays of that number of different RPG systems. So if you hit rung 3, you played 3 different game sessions of 3 different tabletop RPGs. So you could play 3 sessions of Legacy Life Among the Ruins, 3 sessions of Vampire the Masquerade, 3 sessions of Dungeons & Dragons. That's rung 3. And I hit rung 10 last year. And I came into 2019 saying, I'm done with the Ladder of Insanity. So I'm not done with the Ladder of Insanity, but I think in 2019 I'm done. Like I went overboard in an attempt to, that thing like when your grandpa makes you smoke a whole lot of cigarettes, like, and so you'll never like cigarettes again, or maybe you've heard of such a thing. That's what I did this year. I hit rung 12.
Oh my God.
Of the Ladder of Insanity that only had 10 rungs until this year. The 12 games were One Percenter, the Outlaw Motorcycle game, Masks: A New Generation, Apocalypse World, the Black Hack, Project Lycra, Demigods, Monster of the Week, Monster Hearts, Tales from the Loop, Urban Shadows, Spire, and Zombie World. All of them I played at least 12 times. Total play for this year was 264 different sessions that were either live or online. I don't really tally my play-by-post because how do you even do that? 31 different games were new to me, games that I had not played before at all, which is actually down from 2018 when I had 41. And I GM'd 15 different new to me RPGs, down by 1 from 2018. So a little bit of a decline there as I've really focused in on the games to hit that rung 12. I just want to take a moment to say that on RPG Geek, which is where Ladder of Insanity is, where the Play 5 New to Me RPGs and GM 5 New to Me RPGs challenges are, Donna, who is a member of the community, destroyed me this year. I have been the reigning champ of 5 New to Me RPGs and GMing for a few years now. Donna just trashed me. Like 23 different games. He GM'd 23 different games. He played 42 new to him games. Just amazing. Donna's, wow. I mean, like at mid-year, I actually had a conversation with Kai Causey saying, how do I catch him? And he said, stop having fun? I'm like, no, I could probably have fun. I just could never hit the ladder. I've got to make a choice here. And I chose the ladder. So, some exciting things for me this year. I've played or participated in 45 live sessions. Previous years, like last year, I had 224 games played. Those were almost all online. The only live stuff I had was at cons. This year, after I moved to Minneapolis, I had at one point 2 face-to-face groups, and one group is kind of reforming in 2020 as a monthly group, so I'll have 2 face-to-face groups, and I've got a home game going on. My son's 14 now, and I make him play with me, and I'm running a solo game for my wife. If you call it solo, I don't know, 1v1, whatever you want to call it. And so there's a lot of live, like face-to-face play, and it's been fascinating to see that change in how games are. There's a whole lot of BS in live stuff. Did you guys know that?
Oh, yeah.
It takes a long time.
I kind of know it, yeah.
It's interesting. I'd kind of forgotten that. And I kickstarted and wrote a game, Hit the Streets, Defend the Block, which has been a really fun thing. And the system 1%er Outlaw Motorcycle game is the system, but that's the Hit the Streets because there's no separate entry for that yet on RPG Geek. So that's my 20 plays. I had the most plays of that one. I played it a lot, and it was pretty great.
Okay, you've done all this. You've destroyed me. At the beginning of the year, you did say, I'm not doing the Ladder of Insanity. So I was like, oh, this is my year. This is the year that I walk up to the top and it's going to be amazing and I'm going to do it. And then you popped on and then you got Jim to pop on. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get to 10. And then Rich was like, we're going to go to 11. And I'm like, ugh. And then Rich was like, no, we're going to go to 12. And I was like, I can't do that. I can't. I would have to go back to a bunch of games and start over.
I mean, I offered my services to game with you because it's so fun.
Rich, of these games, what is your game of the year?
This was a really tough year for me. I want to talk about some of the honorable mentions first before I reveal the number one. So I'm going to squint and pretend that Bite Marks, originally called Bite Me during the Kickstarter, that Bite Marks didn't technically come out in 2019, although it totally did, like just a week or so ago. come out in PDF, but I don't have my beautiful book yet, so I'm going to hold on to that and call it a 2020 game. That's how I honorable mention it.
Even though any of our picks could be from any year.
That's true. That's true.
Just but we're play.
I know. And that's what I really love about the game of the year and the way that we do it is it's really what's the game you had the most fun with this year. And as you listen to right now, we have at least 20 different entries for Game of the Year from Gauntlet members. Most of them did not come out this year. And I love that it's not just a cult of the new. That can be a thing for people. It's like, oh, yeah, that D&D first edition, that's old. Who cares? I've heard some people like that. Project Lycra has been a revelation. Jen Kitzman's game that she's working steadily on. I just want to say that she has decided on a name for it. Project Lycra was always her working title for it, and she's decided to call it Power Beyond Doubt. And she is even revising some of the aspects of the system after having played it with us, and I'm super excited to play that in 2020. Spire has been surprisingly good. I liked it when I played it with a Gauntlet with Darren Brockes, but Mad J is running it now, and the two different slants on Spire, this game by Grant Howitt about Drow, or Drow, according to however you say it, and them being kind of a subjugated race fighting for independence / terrorists, question mark? Working in cells within an elf-dominated city is really cool. Really good game. The One Ring, which is a lot more conventional style RPG than I'm used to, is one of the games that I played in here with a live group, and I was shocked at how well that game is crafted to help you experience what I feel are the most exciting parts of the Lord of the Rings setting, system, series. I mean, there's mechanics for singing songs and fellowship, and I adore that game. It's really, really well done. Hut Cartel has been a great game for me. Cartel, Mark Diaz Truman's amazing Mexican narco fiction game, is so tightly written, and he's been so generous to not roll his eyes when I ported over to Star Wars for my obsession. And I've just loved the heck out of running that too. It's just so cool to see people play the grittier side of Star Wars. Those are my honorable mentions as I lead my way up to the game of the year for me, which is Magpie Games' Zombie World. I didn't expect it to be. I played it back in Origins way back when it was in development, and it finally came out this year.
Now let's pause here, Rich, because I'm going to say this every time you bring up Zombie World. After you played it at Origins, you was like, ugh, cards, I don't know.
Yes.
I'm not sure about this.
I was really not sure about it. I'm like, PBTA with cards? Come on. Just do the dice. I love dice. Remember, just even, I even told Mark, I'm like, what are you doing, man? Come on, just do the dice. It's a lot more interesting. And as in most things, Mark and Brendan were right. Those are the two main designers, although Magpie is a whole team. So MK, Sarah, all kinds of folks were involved in that. I think it's so elegant to see how the Powered by the Apocalypse game at this generation he's stuck in a box, right? Magpie Games, the manual for this thing is so thin it looks like you're reading up for a board game. The cards, I don't know what math generator they use to figure out how you could stick one bite card in the bite deck and it just be the most terrifying thing. The flip of basic moves to zombie moves, and how basic moves have grit and chance, but a little bit of hope, and zombie moves are just this like miserable, please don't do this to me, don't make me face these zombies. It's horrific, and I've seen people go down, lose their characters, and like, that was so ignominious. But Zombie World is so brilliant in that you have the fastest character creation I've ever seen in PBTA. You flip a few cards and make a couple choices and bam, you're right back in the action. You can even step into an NPC's role if you want. It's got enclave play, so you have these cool play sets that help everybody kind of glom onto the sense of place, which can be a really hard thing to do in an apocalypse, right? I find it so incredibly easy to run. I showed up with Zombie World at my main game of Demigods here at White Bear Lake at Heidi's place. And I have one of the players is always like 20 minutes late. And I said, hey guys, let's throw down Zombie World. And we ended up playing for about 45 minutes. And it felt like a story. Like, shoot, man, that's like lunch break. Or that's like dinner break with a lot of RPGs. But like, you can do this. And it's great. It's super portable. I love Zombie World. Now, I totally recognize that a lot of my love of Zombie World is, I'm sorry, but I still love Walking Dead. I like Fear the Walking Dead. I think that at its heart, that's how IGM is like, oh, watch Walking Dead for like 10 seasons. Bam, you can run this game without even thinking about it. Like, the game emulates that so powerfully. Like the best parts, not the crappy like mid seasons, but the really, really best parts of zombie fiction. And I've talked about Zombie World a few times here, so I know I'm repeating myself for people who have listened to the Gauntlet, but it is my game of the year.
Yeah, if I could add anything, I don't like Walking Dead or any of those things, and I love Zombie World. I love it because it really brings the story about the people that are caught in the situation, and the zombie thing is just the pressure that's on them all the time. It is so human, and you and the other players are so caught up in it. And like you said, when you lose them, you like feel it, and then you just pick it up and you start the next one, and it still feels naturally, and you're just as involved and caught up in it because the situation is just such a pressure cooker. It's really good.
Yeah, without a doubt. I remember one point when Jen had been playing the same character for 5 sessions, and it was just miraculous. And they got into a mess, and she drew from the bite deck. And this was online. It was with my Sunday afternoon group. And she said, guys, I've been bit. And I felt like cold water had been poured on my cheeks, and I felt something down the back of my neck, and my stomach clenched up because like this was a character we'd gotten to know and love, and it was right there, right? There's no hide behind the screen. There's no fudging. Like that bite card happened, and it was so good, so engrossing. Love it. Love this game.
Good pick. Listeners, we're going to hear from some more of our community members about their picks.
My name is Upistory Richard, and I run the RPG Pipeline. I also produce the podcast James and Lloyd Read Indie RPG Blurbs So You Don't Have To, which does exactly what the title suggests. My favourite RPG that I played in 2019 is the indie classic of amnesiacs with psychic powers on the run from shadowy pursuers. It's Cyrun by Meg Baker. Cyrun does not get the love it deserves, either as an introductory game for new players and new GMs, or for its structure and mechanics. For new players, it doesn't front-load character creation. You discover your character as you play, and you always know what you should be doing. You should be running the clues in the title. For new GMs, the game gives you the structure to take you all the way from the beginning to the end. You have players who are always active and invested, and it's always super clear as to who gets to define exactly what a result means. And the Cyrun dice mechanics have an amazing approach to player empowerment. Players only ever risk what they're willing to risk. They choose where to put their results, and they have a say in what their characters do, but also what the consequences are, both good and bad. Rob Carnell and I have done a whole podcast on Cyrun. You can find it at axthetable.co.uk. And finally, the game is so open to be hacked. All you need to know is what your characters could put at risk within the type of game you want to have, and make those your resolution categories. 2019 had a batch of new game families: Forged in the Dark, Descended from the Queen, Alone Among the Stars, more Honey Heist, more Lasers and Feelings. I would love in 2020 to see a whole new family of games all running on Cy.
I'm here with Jamila, a player, GM, and has many games on itch.io. We'll make sure we put links to your page for Sword Queen Games in the comment section for you. So what is your game of the year for 2019?
So it's really, really hard to pick so many good games this year, but I would have to say it's Brinkwood for sure. So Brinkwood is a new game. It's still in development, actually. And it's called, the full name is like Brinkwood Blood of Tyrants. And it's just absolutely excellent. It is a Forged in the Dark game, but it makes some really interesting choices. I don't want to go on for too long, but basically it deconstructs the idea. So the idea is you have a player character, but they're simpler than a normal Blades character because the complexity is in the masks, because you are playing brigands who are struggling under the regime of vampires. And what makes these vampires really interesting is that it's not the usual, like you bite a vampire and they become a vampire. It's more like they have to take blood, they have to mix it with sterling, so then it becomes blood sterling. And so you choose to become a vampire. Only the elites and the nobles who feed on this blood sterling regularly, and also on just normal blood, will gain these vampiric powers. So they have to choose to be the oppressor, right? So they have to choose to benefit from people suffering. And so you play a character who is trying to destroy the system. And you do it because you have escaped to the Brinkwood, and the Fae reach out to you, the Fae who have been missing for a long time, and they offer these masks of power. And so it's always a really cool moment because it still has that Blade flashback mechanic. Like you go in, you're going to the foray, because what you're trying to do is build the rebellion. So you're trying to get supplies, you're trying to get alliances, you're trying to help other people. And there's lots of systems that support how to get your alliances and your revolution going, how to make it strong. And so, but what's really cool is that in the moment when you're like in the foray, when you're going up against the vampires, you get to say you pick up a mask, because there are lots of masks to choose from, and they have cool names like Torment and Judgment and Ruin, and each one has a specific set of powers. So you can make, let's say, a social character, but let's say in the moment you have to be violent, so you can take in the mask of violence. Or it could be the opposite. Let's say you have a character who's really good at wreck, really good at destruction, but then they pick up the mask of lies and they become very good at the social aspect. So it's a lot of interesting play, and the stories are so good because when you create a character, you have to say what tragedy drove them to become a brigand. So when I play or when I run the game, I get so excited because you can like lean into those tragedies. You can build these like beautiful stories. So every time I've played Brinkwood, I've had such a good time. It's such a satisfying feeling, and I'm super excited to see where the game goes. I have so much faith in Eric, who's been working hard on the system.
That sounds amazing. I had seen it, but I didn't realize what the premise was. That sounds great. It's a really good pick. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we are here with Kurt Potts, author of Lighthearted. I'll just mention that. We'll also have a link to Kurt's itch.io store page on the show notes. Kurt, tell us, in 2019, what was your favorite RPG? What was your favorite game?
Thank you for having me on here. First, I feel like this is cheating, and I want to say sorry, but it is the game that I played the most this year, and it's turned out to be my favorite RPG, Lighthearted. I mean, it feels like cheating because I wrote it, right?
Right.
But it really is the game I wish existed and turned around, like had to physically make, because I just couldn't find a game that did everything I wanted in an RPG, and this one does. So the pitch for Lighthearted is that it is a magical 80s RPG of self-discovery. You play college kids trying to outgrow the cliques that they lived with through high school in a not our world's, version of the 1980s. That is basically like the over-the-top Gem and the Holograms version of the 80s. That is to say, the 80s that never existed.
Mm-hmm.
It's all lasers and neon, and loud music. So
what are the things that it does that made you really want to write it? And like when you went to run it, like were the things that sang to you?
The things that it does that I couldn't find anywhere else are it matches my favorite dice system, which is sort of pulled from Savage Worlds. It started out as a Savage Worlds setting. And I started with a Savage Worlds setting and said, how close can I get this to World of Dungeons? And so I just started stripping stuff away and pulling things out. So it uses that. It's got multiple different die types and exploding dice, which I love. I love the excitement of someone rolling a D4 30 times and everyone getting really excited. It focuses on the characters' relationships and their emotions. So one of the big changes that I made is there is an emotional spectrum. So when you do anything in the game, you're rolling a stat die and an emotion die. And so you have this like rainbow band of emotions that you are always moving back and forth on. Every time you take an action that isn't your current emotional state, you're moving back and forth on this thing. So you're always thinking about your character's emotions. I mean, a lot of indie players, they're always thinking about their character's emotions anyway. But one of my favorite moments was I'm sitting down with a trad player who's trying to min-max his character's feelings so he can get the best die every time without taking the penalties. And so he's telling me why he's coming up with these reasons why his character feels this way, and it's really important, and he's constantly bouncing back and forth between these two emotions with the actions he's taking. And I'm like, well, you know what? I did it. I made the trad guy talk about his feelings, and I was so excited. That was one of the moments where I was like, this game is going to work.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Yeah, you got it.
Hi, my name is Leandro Pondok, and my favorite game of 2019, the game I played not the most, but I've enjoyed the most, would have to be Good Society by Storybrewers Role-Playing. Good Society, for those who don't know, is a collaborative role-playing game which can be played with a facilitator or GM-less based on the works of Jane Austen. So you've got the familiar tropes of Regency-era English fiction as written by Jane Austen. You've got questions of class, romance, intrigue, drama, so much drama. And it's just utterly fantastic. I've spent the year playing many different variations of this game, from the expansions that got kickstarted this year, from Downton Abbey flavor to magic flavor to vigilante Zorro flavor to magic flavor again, but in a fairy court, Tolstoy flavored even, and the engine that Haley and V have kind of created to power all these sorts of dramatic flavors, genres, it's just incredibly resilient for like telling these emotional stories. It's got one of my favorite mechanics for inducing collaborative play, which are resolve tokens, which is basically invitations for players to add on cool ideas or interesting twists to the narrative as it's happening. And it's got this really fine structure that also like just funnels people into telling these great stories and letting them steer it from, you got your novel chapters, which is where the main roleplay happens, and you got the epistolary section where you write letters. And man, writing letters where people say one thing but actually mean another, it's just fantastic. Also, I would have to commend the care that Haley and V have put into making sure that collaboration and getting people's comfort and safety levels and just getting everyone to buy in on what people are making baked into the game itself. At the top, you choose the tone of what you're doing, how historically accurate it would be, and what people want or don't want in the game. It's a game that really just ensures that everyone gets a say and everyone is given all these lifty little ways to just express their characters and help color in the story. It's absolutely fantastic. It's Good Society and it's great. It's my favorite game of 2019.
So this year is going to be hard because I already said 2 games in previous years that I would probably pick for this year. So I think the third best game of 2019 will be, for me, Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, because I've already said Godbound before, I've already said Troika before, and honestly, I've been having a bit of fun. I've been having fun with Vampire, so I guess that will be it.
And we're back. Sherry, you've been with us. You talked about a lot of games throughout this year on the podcast. Let's have you talk about your year overall.
Okay.
And then give us your pick.
So I've been playing a lot of games with the Gauntlet, but I think of 2019 is a year where I've concentrated on honing in on what I really want out of a game. So I can't brag about numbers of games. I can brag about getting closer to what I really want to be playing more. This year, I really realized that in a lot of ways it comes down to games that have an emotional edge to them, but give me lots of ways to play into that. So we're going to talk about my honorable mentions for the year. And the first one I have to mention is my favorite vicariously experienced game. I have not played this game, but I've been around the people who have played this game, and they come out with so much joy and happiness that you have to play the game. Passione della Passione by Brandon Leon Gambetta. It is a game of a telenovela, a soap opera. It is all about the drama and the stinger and, oh my gosh, what just happened? That just happened. It is all exclamation points, and everyone who has played it has come out so happy that all I can be is happy for them. And they tell me the story. It makes no sense. And they are still laughing and just so into it. And they want to tell me more, that I know it must have been the most perfect gaming experience in that moment for them. So that's my recommendation based on just what I've witnessed from the players. You don't get that much. I will play it in 2020. But I have not played it yet.
Okay. I'm going to hold you to that one.
Is that fair? Yeah, to do that?
You're playing into his hands.
I know. It was, but I cannot deny it. It is a game that has made that impression on me so strongly, and it's been from people that I didn't expect would like that. My niece, who is kind of shy and withdrawn, that was one of the first games that she played on the Gauntlet, and she came out and she was like, "Oh my God, it was so amazing." So please, worth trying at least once. It is still in beta, isn't it? Or how could...
It's an Ashcan version of it,
Ashcan,
which is available on the Magpie website. It is different now. Brandon has made some changes to it, but it's eminently playable in the form that you can buy it in.
Awesome. All right, then you know where to get it. My best game session for the year, and this was a series of games of about 12 sessions, and it was Tales from the Loop, Tales from the Flood, Freya Ligon Publishing, well-known books. This was a table of people that were playing this game that were so good and so dynamic and so giving that as an experience, it was just wonderful. And I think that we should all stop and talk about our best session, because sometimes gaming, I mean, let's face it, it's really about the people that are sitting there with you doing it. And that series of sessions I will never forget them. They were just wondrous and good and full of hope and angst, and in the end, a little weird and a little hopeful. I don't know what else to say about it. Great players. It was Rich Rogers, who was awesome, and Sarah J., and Darren Brockis, and it was also Patrick Knowles. It was the best table, the best growing up, coming of age story that I've gotten to sit through. It was super fun, and I will hold it dear in my heart the whole time.
Yeah.
Forever and ever. So that was my best game session. I don't know, you guys were in it. What did you think?
I enjoyed it. It was a great series. Like, as a series, I think it was dynamite. I think I would never do Things from the Flood without doing Tales from the Loop before it. The movement and the transition between the two, the first game so informed the second game in a way I hadn't seen at the table before.
I went straight from our Amazing Tales Things series to bring it to the table for wife and kid, expecting I could make it happen again, right? Let's have lightning strike twice. And it was good, but it was nowhere near as emotional and in depth. And I just truly need to teach my son how to game better. It's basically what I learned.
But gosh, we all start there, not there, right?
I know, right? Like me at 14, I was the worst.
I mean, I don't even want to think back. I was a savage.
I love my niece. She's a 20-something. She plays with us. She's been playing with us for a while. She still can't handle horror. She has to break. She has to break and do a joke. She can't stay with it. And it's a thing that you learn.
Mm-hmm. It is. There's a lot of things that you need to learn. The best game that perfectly referenced all the worst games of my life is Die by Kieran Gillen. It's about a set of former role players who get back together for one last game, and they end up in a alternate fantasy world in which they are the characters they used to play, and it all goes terribly wrong. And it really is about revisiting yourself as a horrible teenager, playing with all your social failings. You're playing with all of those out front, and you sort of act those out on each other. And the thing is, the system is pretty well designed for that because everyone is a kind of one-trick pony of a particular personality type. And so you're kind of locked into those behaviors, and it's a pretty rich referential experience. I enjoyed it. And it was also very intense. And so before I go back, I will think about it pretty hard how I'd want to approach it. But I enjoyed that immensely. And I was very impressed with, what do you say? It really did lock into my worst teenage self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I was asking you guys what you thought about the sort of weirdness of Die and the essentially it sort of forcing you into your worst self.
Let me jump in. It was rough. I played the person who has the ability to use their voice to make people do things. And I was pretty uncomfortable most of the series. I had to sit with it for quite a while and living through, in my mind's eye, how this person could take advantage of situations was gross, right? It was weird, but it's a thing. Right? It's a thing that existed in that game. It's a thing that people do in real life. And it was hard. It was a really hard character to portray. And I just tried to do the best I could to portray that character in that situation. But it was oogie. It was. There was a lot of trust at the table. And I don't think I would have played that character past the first few minutes with any other group, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a thing where, in terms of looking at my character's arc and play, I had to stop and go, look, my character's kind of terrible at the start. I'm being this character right now. I want to check in with everybody. It is going to change, but I want to get everybody in on it. It was really interesting. We so leaned into being not great people at the start.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really challenging.
Yep. It was powerful. And I didn't hate it, and I would like to finish the arc out, but that is...
Yeah.
It delivers it, and it brings it to the table, and I cannot deny that. I do say it was the best game that perfectly referenced all my worst games. Literally me and all the other savages at that age trying to work our way through social things. Anyway... Other people are better people. It's a striking game. And if you like hard play, if you like characters who have a bad side and a dark side, it is going to deliver that for you. So keep an eye out for that. I think it's in a preliminary version out there on the internet for you to find. But the all-around best game for me this year was Become One by Jamila Najati. You can find their games on itch.io. I think that all of them are pretty brilliant. but Become One is my best game of the year because it really brought an arc all the way forward for me. One of the previous years I had chosen The Veil as my best game of the year because it was a game that sort of introduced to me for PBTA of using emotions as your stats, that you chose how you felt at that time and rolled with that. And that opened up a kind of game where people had to talk about what they were feeling, what their characters were doing. Competence was not the most important thing. It was how you were approaching it and doing this thing. And that became incredibly important to the game and built a lot of meaning and nuance into what you were doing. Become One actually takes the step beyond that. You are playing an emotion, and you have only one, and you have to live and act in that situation as that fragment of emotion in a situation. You are essentially an AI for a mecha. Your pilot is hurt, and you are trying to keep them alive, do the mission, get back to the ship, survive. You're broken. All you have are little pieces of memories and fragments that are precious to you as an AI because it's what makes you individual, that what makes you special, and you hold on to those and you embody something that is the through line of those memories. So you could play anger, hate, regret, love, and essentially each of you take turns sort of controlling this mech through these situations based on who you are and what these things are that are dear to you. And when things get bad, you can give one of those up, sacrifice to make yourself go forward. Those are the mechanics. Otherwise, everything is very simple. There are really only two moves. The guiding thing is really who you are as an AI and what's precious to you and what you're willing to sacrifice for the success. It is really fascinating to watch people interpret those emotions in those conditions and in a sort of cooperative, and yet you still need to be that role. It's an amazingly intimate exploration of people's sense of those emotions without it being personal. I mean, you're all very there together, close, and exploring that. It's not yourself, it's your idea of it. So it was a really deep set of character play in a very short time, and it just blew the doors off of emotional play in that sense. So for me, that was a great experience, and I thought it was a really amazing, elegant game. So that's my best game of the year, is Become One by Jamila Najati.
Agreed. Thank you, listeners. We're going to go and hear from some more members of our community, and we'll be right back.
Hello, this is Mikael calling in from Frosty, Norway to announce my favorite game of 2019. This was a hard one, so I decided to cheat a little bit and give it to two games. One, which is my favorite game that I played in 2019, and then two for my favorite new game of 2019. The first one is Night Witches, which I started playing with a group of people that I knew from different places. And we had this wonderful journey together, playing I think now about 15 sessions, coming to the end, the last station now to before the war ends. And it's been like a journey of going and getting to know each other, getting more safe with each other, and now really amping up the emotional drama that we can have in between our lovely characters, which has been such a nice thing to MC and watch and facilitate and be a part of. So that's my first game, and the second one is Band of Blades, which came out in 2019, where I played another campaign together with folks that I've streamed. It's a really fun game that really made Forge in the Dark click for me for real this time. I played a lot of it, but this was the first one where everything just fit together in perfect unison to make a very cool game. And I really enjoyed that. Hopefully, we'll be getting to Skydagger Keep sometime in 2020. So those are my favorite games of 2019. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas until that time. Bye.
We are here with Patrick Knowles. Patrick is a designer, a veteran gamer, and we are here with Sherry, Rich, and I. He's the only one so far who gets this 3-person treatment where we're all going to bug him because he didn't necessarily want to answer this question, but we're going to make him answer this question. Patrick, in 2019, what was your game of the year?
So I'm honored to be here with all of you, all 3 of you pestering me, including the cat, who you may hear joining in to give her opinions on Game of the Year. I think for me, for 2019, the biggest surprise out of games and the one that hooked me most and kept pulling me back would definitely be Legacy. The Legacy Life Among the Ruins, 2nd edition. It's Jay Isles and Douglas Moda, and it's just an amazing system. Like, there's so many systems that purport to do the high level, low level combination of like kingdom warfare or large scale intrigues. And they all have various clunkiness and they all have things they don't live up to, but Legacy lives up to all of it. You play these awesome characters in just like the highest moments of their life, while at the same time carrying over this family story that changes the world and changes your characters in unexpected ways. And then just to add on to it, when you've explored every corner of the base game and all the dozens and dozens of playbooks that have come out for it, there are all these different like worlds of Legacy, where instead of playing the normal post-apocalyptic family future, you can play on a generation ship going through space, or you can play kingdom warfare in a semi-historical Russian setting. And there's even more coming out for it. Like I'm super excited about the Misthea setting that should be coming out next year. It's just been an amazing experience of a game.
Awesome. I think that the 3 of us can nod sagely and agree with you on that. So
yes,
thank you so much for taking the time to do that, Patrick.
No problem. Go play Legacy.
Hey Gauntleteers, my name is Sam Zimmerman, and my game of the year for 2019 is Fellowship, 2nd edition by Jacob Randolph. As a longtime GM, I'm used to being very invested in the settings that I create for my games. This has traditionally been the GM's role, providing background and world for the game while the players contribute their individual characters and a few story elements. Fellowship completely flips this on its head. The game pushes the limits of trusting your players to provide major setting elements and incorporates that idea throughout the rules. This emphasis on shared creativity really encourages the players and the GM to both become equally invested in the shared fantasy world that everyone is building together. The players are significantly more invested in saving a town that they created themselves, and the GM can reap the emotional benefits of pushing on those personal investments. I highly encourage everyone to give Fellowship a try, and even if the game as a whole is not your cup of tea, I promise that it will open your eyes to a whole new type of player and GM interaction.
Hey, this is Rich. I am on with Sawyer Rankin, aka Ferret, who joined the Gauntlet community last year. Came on like a barnstormer, running some of my favorite games, Apocalypse World, Monster Hearts, Masks, and he's a fantastic GM, great player. Sawyer, hey, how's it going?
It's going rough right now, but hopefully things will be looking up.
So I wanted to get you on to ask about your game of the year. You had a couple. You wanted to talk about one you played and one you ran. So share with us.
I think even though the most recent one I did, it was a one-shot, I'm going to put that on the back burner, maybe put it in like next year or something, see how it goes, or play it more. But Tyler Lominack ran a worldwide wrestling game where I played a look-based hardcore known as Professor Sparks, or Proctor Sparks, with a Z. And her gimmick was, if you know the Sideshow or the less appropriate term freak show history, There are people who grind metal and sparks that are on their body and shoot sparks into the crowd or do other things. And that was Proctor Sparks' main gimmick. She would come out in lots of actual laboratory equipment that was to protect your body with like pieces of metal and shoot sparks at people, break beakers over their head. Pyrotechnics was the main thing. I believe you had a character that had been in one of Tyler's games that was a Don't Call Me the Terminator style guy that she actually partnered up with. In one, awesome. And it was a Royal Rumble where she was almost thrown out of the ring. He came in and she reprogrammed him to fight for her.
That is fantastic. I love it.
And Proctor Sparks was based a bit on my life. She was adopted by Chinese immigrants, like my godparents being from Malaysia and Taiwan, respectively.
Oh, wow.
And Proctor Sparks got into a lot of trouble with her fiance, who was her girlfriend until the very last session.
Oh.
And because Proctor Sparks was doing triple duty on set as a wrestler, a safety inspector, and backdoor clinician.
That sounds appropriate for Worldwide Wrestling.
And her girlfriend was a pharmacist and was getting tired of being called as like, yeah, I need like acetaminophen and like I need like the lowest dose of morphine you can sneak out.
That's crazy. All in one session? That is.
No, that was over 4 sessions.
Okay.
And the first session, she said goodbye to her girlfriend because she was a college professor who had not gotten tenure but was taking her sick leave that she had accrued to go on the road. And her parents, Proctor Sparks' parents, were very against this because you have a secure teaching job, you have a secure girlfriend, you're going on the road to put yourself in danger. We love you. Stop doing this. Oh my God, why are you on fire?
Oh, that's great. That is great. So, what was the other game of the year for you?
The one that I ran, it's probably not just a game, it's the series I did where it's Apocalypse World. Where I've introduced, it's the one you've played in both sessions, where I introduced the Psychic Maelstrom as a Dust Bowl era malaise that literally strips away passion and emotion and thought and needs to be fought with spectacle. I played this in Las Vegas and Nashville with a G because it's Apocalypse World. And I plan to continue it maybe in Burned Over, maybe in just raw Apocalypse World with Nolans later in 2020.
Oh my goodness, that is... Whew, I'm excited for that.
Every player that I had in those games was amazing. It was a good time with safety tools, as one of the players in the first session with Las Vegas was not comfortable with a Hocus. So the Hocus' player changed themselves into a Brainer, which, if you know Apocalypse World, should not make you feel safer, but did. And of course, there's always the fact that the manifestation of the goddess of entertainment took the form of Dolly Parton and literally fought the manifestation of the Psychic Maelstrom. Which, I mean, if you're going to end a game session in a month, that is a way to go out. And I personally love apocalypses of all stripes. My mother and I, back when I was younger and there were video stores to rent videos from, would go and we would each rent like one movie we both wanted, like one of us wanted to watch. Like she would rent a mystery movie, I'd rent a kids movie, and together we'd get together and pick one of those bottom of the barrel VHS release scrape together things that would look maybe like a matte painting, but on the back you could tell they had a budget of that matte painting. And I respect this because it also helped my writing career, with her showing me like, this is bad writing, like this is all that, like, this doesn't make sense, like this apocalypse is, but it's like the apocalypse always meant love to me because it was time I spent with my mom deconstructing things. And my favorite memory of this, we were watching, I think it was Amazon Warriors 3000 or something of that. All the men had died. They were only women because 1980s sleaze. And the women find the prime ultra alpha male specimen, which was written on the tube. And the guy looked like me with about 50% less hair and 50% more weight.
Oh my goodness.
And my mom paused the scene as he came out. And then there were the two actresses and him. And she pointed to the screen and said, "Now, Sawyer, which one of these three is the director?" But yeah, so I always try to, I like different apocalypses. So being able to create one that I wanted to go back to was an amazing feeling. And I'm very grateful for the Gauntlet for doing that with me. And having such wonderful players as yourself with a gun lugger that I loved, which I usually hate gun luggers because they're the ones that people who are not used to PBTA see. It's like, oh, I can fight like a gang. I get a lot of weapons. I'll play this like a fighter in D&D. It's like, no, there's better things to do.
It's true.
But she fought for her Twinkies and her love.
I mean, in that order, right?
Well, her love of Twinkies, that's the highest love.
Well, Sawyer, I am so looking forward to gaming with you more in 2020. And also, just as a little pocket thing, you could look, and Veritheim Games has a number of awesome Monster Heart supplements, and you said that you're working on some burned over stuff. So lots of things. And the best place to find that is on DriveThru. Is that right?
DriveThru RPG. I do have some of it up on itch.io, but due to a dispute with my name change, I can no longer pull out money on itch.io, so I make the money on DriveThru RPG.
Okay, so let's drive everybody to DriveThru RPG then.
But I also will have probably my last bit of Monster Heart skins coming out in 2020 as well. I'm hoping to do what I'm going to be tentatively calling the pagan skins, and looking at creatures from different pagan mythologies, such as the Domovoi as the latchkey kid, and the Preta as the kid with eating disorders.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Cool. Well, we will definitely keep folks up to date as that goes through the process of coming out. Thank you so much for coming on, Ferret, and talking about your game of the year.
Thank you very much for having me.
My name's Sean Smith. I'm the designer of Exuvier and Quarrel and Fable. And for me, the game of the year, my game of the year, has been Trophy, or Trophy Dark, from Jesse Ross. I played it a while back, particularly when I was trying to write up something for the Incursion competition, and it's genuinely been one of the most prominent times that I've actually felt catharsis during a role-playing game, particularly towards the end where both of the players had really got the hang of the way in which the Devil's Bargains would work, and were just driving the story forwards and digging more and more hooks into each other to pull themselves down. And it was an absolutely wonderful experience, and one that I'm hoping to replicate sometime soon. So certainly check out Trophy Dark if you have somehow yet not done that.
All right, listeners, we're back, and we get to my choices. Now, I could complain more about the Ladder of Insanity and being destroyed by Rich, so I'm going to. I tried my darndest, and I'm going to be hitting that like a week after we record this, but it'll be just before the end of the new year, and only at rung 11.
Only at a rung that didn't exist until this year.
Yeah, we'll see next year how this all goes. I want to talk about some of the games I played a lot that, we've talked about Tales from the Loop, Things from the Flood. That was a really solid game. There were some other games that I ran that were really strong revelations to me. I ran Trail of Cthulhu and had a very good time with that. I did my Impulse Drive Coriolis hack. That was solid. Legacy Life Among the Ruins. I finally figured out how that game works, and I did a much better job with it this year. So those are all ones that I think are interesting and worth thinking about. A lot of the games that I have on my list that I run, you've heard me talk about throughout this year. So I won't go too much into it. I do want to talk about a few notables, a few runners-up. If we're going to talk about, I did some hacks this year. I'm going to talk about best hacks. Sherry's hack of Blades in the Dark for Neo Shinobi Vendetta, the Cyberpunk anime ninja game. That was a really good game. It got a lot of emotional play out of a Blade style game, which kind of surprised me. And it was also super fun and super cool. Fraser was great. There's a great moment in that game where, as a consequence for something I say, well, you do it, but you don't look awesome doing it. And Fraser's like, no, I've got to resist that consequence because I want to look awesome. And it was like my favorite moment of pushing a player all year. But both of those, that and Veil Fantasy, I did my Fantasy Hack of the Veil. I think it's really good. Had a great time with it. I'm looking forward to playing more of that next year. The biggest surprise game, the game that I went into going, okay, yeah, I'll play this. This is fine. Let's do this. That's good. Bat Hack. Rich Rogers' game of baseball. I don't care for baseball. I grew up here, an hour and a half outside Chicago, so we would dragged in to see the Cubs or the White Sox. And my dad always liked baseball, but I never really dug it and never really understood what was going on behind the scenes. This game gave me an appreciation for that. The character play was dynamite. It was sad and wonderful. And when the game would go badly, your heart would break a little. And it's really important that everyone push Rich to work on that game in 2020 because it's good.
It's really good.
And if you don't like baseball, it's playable and fun. If you do like baseball, I'm sure you're going to get a ton out of it. It's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah. A few games that I wish I had gotten to play more of that I want to mention just sort of off the top of my head. More Changing the Lost, Powered by the Apocalypse. It's a good game. Want to play more of that.
Yes, please, more.
Cryptomancer. I did a few sessions of that, and I finally clicked for me again. Another game that it clicked, and I want to do more of that. And Night's Black Agents Solo Ops.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really good. It fixes some of the issues I've had with Gumshoe, and it was really intense, and I like that setting. I want to do more of that in this coming year. But the game that I picked for my Game of the Year, and it wasn't a hard choice for me. It was a game that repeatedly I got great sessions out of when I ran it. That was dynamite every time I ran it. That was different every time I ran it. Was Pasión de las Pasiones by Brandon Leon Gambetta. It's been mentioned before. It is a Powered by the Apocalypse game of Latino telenovelas. And I ran a 4-part session that was great. And then I ran a bunch of it at Gen Con for people I'd never met before, who hadn't seen it, who didn't know who I was. I'm playing face-to-face. It was great. Each one of those sessions at Gen Con was dynamite in a different way. Every one of those stories was crystallized and interesting and fun. And I ran it at Gauntlet Con. And again, another game that was dynamite. It has a lot of great features. It, more than a lot of PBTA games, really goes, look, this is the genre. And here are the tools to do this genre. And we're unapologetically in this genre. Like, there are games that go, oh, this is genre emulation, but they kind of do it a little more loose. This game goes, this is what you're playing. And it leans into that so hard. It's got really interesting roles. It's got an interesting set of questions for each move and for each playbook. And that's how you determine the number that you're rolling is yes answers to these questions give you a bonus. So you're always leaning into that. If you want to do something, you want to look at that move and you want to figure out how to lean into it. And that's great. There are moves that change the fiction in a really wonderful way. The revised version that Brandon has developed is great. Cleared out Deadwood, focused in on the great bits, doubled down on them. It's really, really solid. It's a game I appreciate for starting in the middle of things. Like, it goes, okay, here are your characters, let's build some relationships, and we're starting late in the season. Our show has been going for a number of episodes, and everybody, when I run it, buys into that. Everybody's like, okay, we already know that we've done this thing in the past, and we've obviously had scenes like this in the past. There's a previously on, like you have a list of things for the previously on that is really good. It's super fun to do that. It's super fun to do the opening credits with the players. All of those are excellent. I love that your epilogues can be next time on and have like not a direct connection, like they're out of context. So you can put this scene and you're like, okay, how did we get to there? Why does he have a gun now? Those kinds of things. The game sets it up for that. Other thing that I think is magnificent is when I ran this in a 4-shot, when we played, and it just happened because sort of what the players pushed towards, we'd have a session, and then we'd have the next session, and that next session didn't directly follow on from the previous session. We missed a couple of episodes, and now we're down the road a little ways, and that was great because people could play with what had happened. We could draw some assumptions, and it felt like you were going, okay, I'm going to watch episode 4, 7, 12, and 16. And it made sense, and it felt right. It was great. Like, I'm so happy that I ran it. I'm so happy that I ran it with such a wide number of people. I had some great tables at Gen Con that were mostly women, mostly men. It was a great mix. I ran for 2 players in one session, and that was super intense. I had someone sit down. They didn't know what the game really was. They weren't sure about the genre, but they said, but I play a lot of dating sim video games. And I was like, well, you have come to the right place. And it was great. They had this beautiful character who played the employee, which is my favorite playbook, and they did such a good job with it. And they had an evil twin brother who was another player, and it was so good. I'm so happy this game exists. Like, it is a game that I'm happy every time I run it, and that's great. And I run a lot of stuff, and it still excites me each time. So definitely my game of the year.
You do. You always walk downstairs grinning.
Yeah.
Just so happy.
That's awesome. I really love all the energy you bring to the Passiones games that you run. It's fascinating.
It's super great. Listeners, we're going to do one more check-in with our community members, and then we're going to come in with our last segment.
My name is Stephen Desjardins, and my game of the year for 2019 is Monster Hearts, which is not new, but which is new to me. What I find special about Monster Hearts is how I'm able to choose playbooks that work with the setting to create really memorable characters. And I still haven't played in a generic setting, and I don't know whether I'd find a contemporary game with no hook to be particularly interesting. But, for example, in one of Catherine Rahman's Kingsport games, set in 1969, I decided to play a Vietnamese refugee newly come to America, and I chose the Inferno playbook to explain how he got there. And I thought that really brought something to the period, made it a very specific, very interesting character. In another series inspired by The Last Unicorn, I chose the Harpy pregen and found myself facing down the Unicorn character. Unicorns are immortal, but harpies are ancient. I am heir to thousands of years of power. Do not threaten me. In Kingsport 1876, I chose a werewolf, which seemed like the perfect playbook for a family of rapacious Gilded Age capitalists. And all of these characters went in directions I didn't expect, but were true to their archetypes and to the period of the game. And even when the games climaxed in player versus player fights, which I ordinarily hate, the resolutions were dramatic and satisfying. Monster Hearts encourages me to lean into character choices that surprise me, and that's why it's my game of the year.
Hi, my name is Stephen Watkins, and my favorite game that came out in 2019 is For the Queen. Playing this game with friends leaves me with a feeling of satisfaction that is surprising in such a small package. The game itself is small, about the size of a deck of tarot cards. The learning curve is also small, as the game teaches the rules during the beginning of play. The time to play is short, maybe only an hour or two. For such a small package, the gameplay that has come out of this has been fantastic and imaginative. The game system gets out of the way and allows the player's creativity to take center stage during the story. Finally, the game system has a lot of promise, as there are a number of Descended from the Queen games in development at the moment. I have only played one of these variants, but it's easy to see how the system can be used in many different genres.
Hey, this is Rich, very excited to bring on for his Game of the Year pick, ... Tyler Lominack. Tyler is a staunch, steadfast GM for the Gauntlet. He runs tons of games. He also has been one of the mentors for folks who wanted to learn about the way that we play and get some support and feedback. And Tyler's been a really important part of that. Tyler, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic.
Awesome. I am so excited to bring you on because I really value your opinion on games. We have had many conversations over the years. And this was a great year for me because we got to meet each other at Origins this year. That was really special.
Fantastic, right there in person.
I know. We got to dine together, game together. It's just very cool stuff. So, Tyler, what is your game of the year?
Well, I'm cheating because I have several that really made huge impacts on me. And so I've sort of broken them down a little bit, but each and every one of them made a very direct emotional grab into me. And so I'm going to bring up first my perennial favorite game. Anyone who knows me knows I love Worldwide Wrestling, WWW. It is one of the great PBTAs. It's the game that helped me find the Gauntlet in the first place. And I got to play under the true master Lowell Francis a couple of times this year, but I also got to run it some. And I ran in the world that Lowell created, the Gauntlet League Wrestling, and I used the On the Road by Adam Ultraberg expansion for it. And it was magnificent. It was very emotional. It was stories you don't usually see in WWW. And I did 2 months of it. And by far and away, WWW always satisfies. And I really loved the emotional stuff that was brought in from that On the Road.
Nice. That sounds really, really cool.
Now, things I played, I'm going to give another favorite to The Between, which Jason Cordova is writing. I'm sincerely hoping it's going to get to Kickstart soon. He's been working on it for quite some time, and I got to go through a lot of beta and a lot of the development of it, and there are some brilliant things that he is doing in that game. I loved it. I love the characters. I love the mood. I love the ambiance. I love what it did with the mechanics. It brought in new things I had never seen in anything else. And as far as a game that just something new and trying and seeing what a game could be, Between has got to be one of my favorite of the year.
That is really cool. I'm so excited to hear that. And I hope Jason gives this a listen because I know it's got to be encouraging to hear that feedback. That's awesome.
And to continue on the theme of things people probably won't be able to play because they're not out there yet, Lowell Francis has made a Powered by the Apocalypse Changeling the Lost hack that is delightful, absolutely wonderful.
You are not kidding.
We've got to play it together.
Mm-hmm.
We've had deep emotion with it. Lowell has done so much work. It is huge in its scope, and it is out there right now as the workshop piece, but I think Lowell's going to do something amazing with it, and I've enjoyed every time I've played it. I've run it. I put it out there to run, and it paid off in the run. So for aspirational game that I want to see get out there and get done, I know Lowell has nothing to do, so that's something. That's something to get out. But it was brilliant every time I played it.
I am holding off until Hearts of Wulin is in the done state where Lowell can put his development brain on other things. Because I remember when there was kind of an SRD or some kind of licensing where you could release things underneath Changeling that Onyx Path talked about this year, paving the way. So, yeah, you and me, bro, we need to hit him up in 2020. That would be awesome.
It. Keep him busy. And finally, is another game that I had, and this may be the game that most connected with me on an emotional level in a lot of ways. It's the Bat Hack by you,
Rich
Rogers.
Oh my gosh!
But it's a game about baseball, I am kind of a sports nerd, and that's not a common thing, I think, in the Gauntlet, but I love sports, and I love kind of the art of sports, the strategy, the way that you can do things from a cerebral point of view in sports. And the Bat Hack gave me a lot of that, along with the really deep personal stories that were going with it. And it was it was spectacular. I wanted to be more and more in each part of it. I wanted to be more in the games. I wanted to play them over and over and over. And I also wanted to feel and know these characters, because watching the highs and lows of our characters was just amazing.
Yeah. When Quisqueya was stuck in a slump and he just could not fight his way out, he couldn't buy himself a hit, that broke my heart. Oh gosh, there were so many good moments. Tyler, you're a next level player. Like you're the kind of guy who is great at RPGs, but also can play highly strategic games. You're the train game guy. It's awesome. And you taught me so much about Bat Hack from the way you approach things. And there were things where I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just throw this out. And Tyler would take it and say, oh, we need to organize it this way, or let's approach it in this way to give us the maximum benefit. And you guys would just squeeze things out. It was neat. It was neat to see that game within a game that you were mastering as we were learning about Bat Hack. So I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me.
Well, it's just brilliant. And I cannot wait to see more and more of it.
Thank you. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for coming on, cheating, and giving us such wonderful selections. We appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me go on and on. And God, that's gaming with the Gauntlet. It's so much, you get overload. It's you can't stop.
Hi, I'm Walter, and I'd like to tell you about my favorite game of 2019, which is Night Witches by Jason Morningstar. Night Witches is a game about Soviet airwomen who are flying during the Second World War, and they are very unsupported. They are flying relic First World War airplanes, and it is a brutal game in the best way. So I had a great group of people to play with. The game master and all the other players were brilliant, and the game master did something really great in the beginning. Asked us to give a little opening montage of our characters, sort of the intro scenes, what's happening. Show us a picture of your characters in action in these cutscene montage while the opening credits are rolling. And I remember everybody's characters were very scrappy and fun, and it was very Charlie's Angels-esque. I remember my character was swiping a report from the commander's desk to be, oh, look how scrappy and anti-authoritarian I am. And it was really fun. And then we started playing, and things took a nosedive. So somehow, totally surprisingly to me, my character ended up sort of in charge of the little squadron of whatever wing of 4 planes, and I had to make decisions about who was flying with who and what order we were going to do, and little command kind of decisions. And people started getting shot down behind enemy lines. People started dying. There were horrible consequences and it was on my character. And the game master and the other players let it be known that it was on my character. And the stress of everything that happened was really intense. I mean, just the weight of these decisions. And there were beautiful moments. There were wonderful moments of interaction between the characters, and there was romance. There were a lot of lovely scenes. However, every character really changed. All the characters just became dragged down in this grueling grind of the war and the horrible things that were happening all around them and to them. And it was all driven by the game mechanics. And it's really beautiful how the mechanics of this game are able to create that atmosphere, despite what we all came in trying to bring to it, right? And there was no fighting it. It just changed our characters. It changed how I was feeling as a player. I couldn't help but feel what my character was feeling to some degree. And that bleed was horribly beautiful. And I really felt so close to everyone else at the table. It was a great gaming group to begin with. And by the end, I felt like we'd really been through something together. And I really came away with an admiration for the real life women who were in that circumstance during the Second World War as well. So all of these are reasons why Night Witches is my favorite game of 2019.
Hi, my name is Will, and this has been my first year of the Gauntlet. And it's been a wonderful year playing so many games I never thought I'd ever get to play. Playing games I literally wouldn't have ever had the chance to play elsewhere even. However, if I had to choose just one game of all of the ones that I played in 2019, I'd have to choose Urban Shadows from Magpie Games. So in David Walker's LA Noire series, we really got to play Urban Shadows as I think it's meant to be played. I got to really exploit the moves of my playbook, the Oracle, and I was able to pull on all the strands of fate, even though I was pretty weak. So my character owed so many depths, was never in a good position at any point in the game, but he was always able to lie, to manipulate all the other NPCs and even the other player characters, keeping just one step ahead of the horrible fate that awaited him. At least right up until the end. It was a noir after all. But, Richie left the streets a little brighter, even if it ended in darkness for him. So this game of Urban Shadows built on some of the things that I'd learned from Masks about how the moves can affect other players as well as the overall narrative and the NPCs. And it also showed me clearly how PBTA games help players build the world in discrete fashion, sort of one section at a time, overall building this bigger picture. But I think the key thing about Urban Shadows was that it gave me PvP in a really interesting way. Sometimes you can just manipulate people using the moves, and sometimes you can even do it for their own good. So yeah, amongst all the ones that I played over the last year, and it's been more than I'd ever played in my entire life before, Urban Shadows was a real great experience, and I really hope to pick that up again one day.
Hey, this is Rich again, and I'm excited to bring on my co-host from Plus One Forward podcast, Rach Shelke. How you doing, Rach?
I'm doing not worse for wear. It is Christmas or holiday time around here at work, and it's a little bit hectic, but I am excited to talk about our games of the year.
Happy Boxing Day ahead of time. I think that's the only one you guys celebrate up there, right?
Yeah, it's when we put all of the boxes to the curb and then the cats get to go sit inside them. It's like a really festive feline holiday.
All right, I brought you on to talk about the game of the year. So, Rach, share with me, what is the game of the year 2019 for you?
My game of the year is something I've talked about on the Gauntlet podcast, which is Legacy Life Among the Ruins, 2nd edition. And we've already spoken a little bit of this game at length in that episode, which would have released a couple of weeks ago now, I think. And I want to spend some time now talking about why I think this game has had such a big impact on me. It was almost heralded in my year back when I was at Cannes Games in May, which is a gaming convention in Ottawa, where I was talking about how I loved Apocalypse World, but I didn't always love what Apocalypse World brought out of particular players. And one of the players I was talking to at that game suggested, have you seen Legacy Life Among the Ruins? Have you seen what that game's doing in the post-apocalyptic space? And I love me some post-apocalyptic fiction. It's one of my favorite gaming genres. I just find it so interesting. So I was really excited and compelled. After playing the game, I don't think it was quite what that person had suggested, that it was the opposite of Apocalypse World, but it's this really fascinating, often challenging game that focuses on world building at the same time as talking about the story and the legacy of the family you're controlling, and also the story and the legacy of the player characters you're controlling. And what really sets my mind on fire is the communal storytelling aspect of the game. We talk a lot on Plus One Forward about building trust at the table and being fans of other players or being the fans of the players, in the case of you being the MC. But I'll be completely honest, that is sometimes a challenge for me. Sometimes I can be very guarded or very protective of my toys. And Legacy has really pushed me in terms of opening myself up, trust other players to be playing in the best interest of me and of the story overall, because you have to share parts of your family and parts of the world that you're building with the other players and be excited about that and be okay if the other player might accidentally do something that blows up the parts of the world that you build, and understanding that that's not antagonistic. That's just the opening to do something else that's even more exciting.
That is really cool and terrifying. I'm with you. Like handing over the lovely creation that you have, maybe only expressed out loud to a certain degree, but in your head you may already have that headcanon that you're constructing in there, and being worried about somebody tearing it apart or just completely misreading what it is that you'd said and taking it in this weird ass direction. I hear that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, it was scary for a while. And it's also scary when people latch on to your characters and become fans of them, because that happened to me in this game too. I think I may have brought it up that I named all of the members of my family after different astrologers. And there is, I believe, a Taiwanese astrologer currently operating with the English name Typhoon Lee, which is...
I just love that name.
It's the best name. And I'm like, cool, this is my new character for the next stage. And people were like, oh, that's cool. Hey, Rach, describe to us what you think this character is. I'm like, I think this character really wants the best for the world, but feels like he's working against the system. And then during that whole churning of the age, people kept taking this, at the time, NPC, who was going to become my new PC, and said, I think Typhoon happens to be in this situation here. Like, I want this to be a touchstone in the lead up to him being this badass later. And we had like an almost... like when you play Microscope and then you take, there's a way to play Microscope where you go through the age again and you play from the point of view of a particular NPC and say, what is this person's story? That's what the churning of the age became for my new PC. And it was a little bit nerve-wracking to see people just latch onto this character and go, I'm a fan of this character already. Like, tell me more about him. I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what class he's going to be. And at the end of that session, it felt so good, but it made me so nervous the whole time through.
Oh man, what a cool moment to go through. I'm really excited that you are enjoying Legacy. I just started playing in a campaign of it myself, and I hope to have the same revelatory fun that you're enjoying.
Oh, it's a big commitment I find in terms of story building and world building. But if you can, and I've said this before on either +1 for the Gauntlet or possibly both of them, if you can get a group that is very enthusiastic about having that shared story, it's such a beautiful experience.
Cool. Well, Rach, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your game of the year with us.
Thank you for interviewing me today, Rich.
All right, we're walking out this year. This is 2019, finishing out. This has been a really interesting year for all of us. I took over as Gauntlet Community Manager. We're looking forward to a really interesting 2020 in terms of focusing on the Gauntlet as a gaming community, as a gaming club, finding new ways to bring in people this year, really, really looking at that and doubling down on that. So in part, that is sort of what is giving me life, but that's not the answer that I'm actually going to give to that question. Listeners, this is our final segment, Giving Me Life. And you'll notice that I did not do that with the exaggerated voice that I sometimes do. But Sherry, take us out of 2019. Right now at this point, what is giving you life?
One of the things is I always enjoy getting to know things that other people love. And I did not expect when I started playing Pokemon that this would be a thing that I would be speaking sort of randomly to someone and they say, well, what are you playing? Because they know I play video games. And I'd say Pokemon, and their eyes would light up. And so many people that I work with that are in IT and are in analysis and stuff like that, they're like, Pokemon, do they still have? And they would name whoever their favorite Pokemon was. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm only a few little ways in. And Everyone has Pokemon stories, and it cuts across all different age groups. This game has been out for a long time, and I was a little old when it came out, which is telling you how old I am. But everyone younger than me has played it or had a friend who is obsessed with it or has some goofy Pokemon story, and it has been a real treat to just hear their stories about something that's so goofy. I mean, it literally is a cartoon thing, but people love it and remember these zany names decades after they've played that game. So it has been super fun for that, for connecting to a bunch of people with something that they remember fondly.
Awesome. Rich, what is giving you life?
Oh, this is going to be so lame. What's giving me life is that on Black Friday, I went out and picked up a new TV, a nice little 58-inch. And so we swapped that out with a living room TV and moved the 50-inch that was down there up to my office. And having a new TV here with my backup Xbox One, I started playing a game that I enjoyed in 2018, but literally, I checked the last save file. It was December 31st, 2018. I had not played all year long. And that is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. That's the one that's in the ancient Greece time setting. And I've been playing the crap out of it. It's insane. I just love Cassandra, like just run around and hop on a horse and ride down to a village and fight some Spartans, and then I'll hop in a ship and go fight some pirates and get to another island, fight some Athenians and go on a quest and have some conversations. It's just every moment of that game I could just stop, turn around, and take a screenshot. It's so gorgeous, and I know it's an old tech, old game, but it's fun. It's so fun. I mean, I'm not even that high. I'm like 32nd level. I'm sure people have played the crap way more out of that game than I have, but I could just jump in and run around for a little bit and hack up some dudes and shoot some people and then talk to someone that makes me kind of sad, and it's amazing. I love it. It's a big dumb sandbox, and it's great. It's the most fun I've had playing a video game all year long.
Well, I guess I should finish the hat trick trifecta of giving me life here. So what's giving me life is I really love JRPGs. They're one of my favorite things.
What?
You may have known this. I started a series that I hadn't played before that was on the PS3, and it was on one of the PlayStation Now, so it was a streaming thing, and I really loved it. It is a game called Legend of Heroes, Trails of Cold Steel. It's a weird, slightly obscure series. I mean, it's out there, but people don't talk about it much. And this is the first game of a trilogy. But here's what I love. It is a school game. You play a bunch of kids who go to this school, and they're from different places, and this is kind of a steampunk fantasy world. There's lots of backstory, lots of character stories, and then in each little segment, you have to go and explore this dungeon that's on the campus of the school. But then in between, you're sent out on these field excursions, and you go to different people's homelands or different places, and you go and do a story there. And that deepens their character's backstory, and it deepens the story overall. And that structure is really good. I'm going to steal the hell out of that when I go to run another fantasy school game. And it's good. It's not the best JRPG in the world, but it is hitting and ticking all of my boxes. Listeners, that is our show. Thank you so much for listening to us. If you'd like, you could subscribe, maybe comment, rate. That'd be great for this podcast. Or check out any of our other Gauntlet Network podcasts, like the eminable Plus One Forward, our PBTA podcast, or Fear of a Black Dragon, or Farrier's Bellows. We've got a great set. Please feel free to check that out. If you need to contact us, you can contact us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. And you can always check out our website at gauntlet-rpg.com. Of course, all of this work that we do, the community, these podcasts, everything is supported by the Patreon that we have. So you can check out us on Patreon/Gauntlet. Listeners, that's our show. Sherry, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a joy and a pleasure.
And Rich, thank you for joining us and doing, let me put this out because it needs to be said again and again and again. If we sound at all coherent or interesting, it is entirely due to the efforts of Rich Rogers, who has spent this year doing this and working for us. It has been a year since we lost Paul. I want to give a shout out to him, who had been a mainstay of the Gauntlet, and Rich has stepped in and has done a great job. And just everybody who listens to our backlog of podcasts, just remember that and give a thought to Paul and a prayer for him.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that, Lowell. Thank you so much.
And that's our show.